All right, fourth graders, so I'm going to show you another trick with fractions and decimals that you guys are going to be working on today. So I'm going to read you the pose the problem. So it says 3/4 of the students in Mr. Brown's class have a younger brother or sister. How would you write 3/4 as a decimal? So on Monday, when you had to change fractions to decimals, it was a little bit easier because all the fractions you were given were in tenths. This fraction, 3/4, is not in tenths, which seems like it would be hard to change to a decimal, but it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to show you how you would do that. So if we have the fraction 3/4, and we want to write that as a decimal, well, we don't really have a fourths place when it comes to decimals. We only have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on. So here's how you would do that. You would try to change it to tenths, or maybe even change it to hundredths, whatever works. So I'm going to try tenths first. So if I take my fraction and I try to change it so that its decimal is in tenths and not fourths, I have to think, 4 times what is 10? Well, nothing. That's not even possible. So will tenths work? No. So we have to, instead of using tenths, use hundredths. So instead, I will change this to hundredths, and I'll think, 4 times what is 100? Well, this one I like to think of quarters. 4 times 25 is 100. So remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So I will do 3 times 25. That's just like thinking 3/4. 3 times 25 is 75. So 3/4 changes to 75 hundredths. That should look pretty familiar from what you learned on Monday. So now I can change it to a decimal. So decimal form would be 0, because it's not even the number 1 yet, 0.75. 75 hundredths, which is the exact same thing as 3/4. All right, I want to show you another one because I think more practice the better. So I'm going to erase this one. Let's say we have the fraction 1/4. Okay, so again, this one's not in tenths, it's not in hundredths, so it seems like it's hard to change to a decimal, but we can do it. So I'm going to try to change it to tenths first. If it doesn't work, then I'll try hundredths. All right, so let's see. 4 times what is 10? Well, you can't do that. So did tenths work? No, so we'll have to do 100. So I'll change this to hundredths. So then I think 4 times what is 100? Again, think of quarters. 4 times 25 is 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And that's easy multiplication. 1 times 25 is 25. So 1/4 is changed to 25 hundredths. Now it should be changing to a decimal quite easy. So 25 hundredths as a decimal is 0 because it's not even the number 1 yet. The decimal point, and then 25. 25 hundredths, which is equal to 1/4. So to write 1/4 as a decimal, you would write it as 25 hundredths because it's the same thing. All right, I'm gonna do one more example. All right, so this time, the fraction I'm gonna use is 4/5. Okay, so again, I have to change it to a decimal, but decimals you can only use tenths, hundredths, thousandths, so on, and this one is in fifths, so I need to change it. I'll try tenths first. So if I change it to tenths, let's see if that even works. 5 times what is 10? Well, 5 times 2 is 10. So that time it worked, and whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I will do 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. So 4/5 is changed to 8/10. Now I can write it as a decimal. 8/10 is not even the number 1 yet, so we'll put a 0 with the decimal point, and then the place that comes right after the decimal point is the tenths place. How many tenths do I have? Well, I have 8. So I'll put an 8 there. So 8/10 as a decimal is the same thing as 4/5 as a fraction. So that is how you change fractions that don't always have tenths or hundredths as their denominators to a fraction. decimal. You just have to find an equivalent fraction first, and then writing the decimal becomes really easy.